Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, wisdom seekers. So glad to have you with us today and looking forward to an hour of interesting conversation. And I believe this is going to be a very challenging conversation because this has become such a big deal around us with the fear that we are dealing with. And so, looking forward to it. A couple of tips that or admin things to share. Just remind people as we're doing this that if I'm looking around, seem distracted, I'm not. I'm dealing with multiple screens to be able to keep us going and functioning. And so I try to minimize it, but it is what it is. Also remind you, please, to introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from, and of course, share your thoughts and questions in the comments section. And as a matter of clarity, I always like to remind people of how we see wisdom on Wisdom Seeker. And that is, it's a journey, it's a process. It starts with gaining knowledge and picking that up however we do, either formally or informally, and then being sure not to stop there, because a lot of people want to think in terms of that being the power that we have, and it isn't. That's just the beginning. And next step in the journey and process is the step of gaining understanding through experience and beginning to apply the knowledge we've gained, use it in everyday situations in life. And then the last step in the process is where we move from knowledge and understanding into wisdom. And that's when we start seeing knowledge, understanding ourselves and the world from a much bigger perspective, and especially outside of ourselves, because in order to have wisdom, we've got to be able to see the world other than just as it involves us. And so, one other disclaimer is this is going to be a bit of a challenging topic, and I promise I'm not going to try to upset anyone, but I am going to be honest that I think as we have this conversation, that it may at moments be challenging to hear some of the concepts and thoughts. And so, as usual, we'll have good conversation, engagement, and everyone share their thoughts. We'll do it respectfully because that's just the way we do things. And good fortune today to have my friend, colleague, and brother in Christ, Anton, with us today. So I'm going to bring Anton on, and then we will jump into the topic. For bring Anton, welcome Rosemary from Australia and Pearl from India, and I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Wagi from Egypt, and we've got Faiza from Algeria, and Lee from here in the U.S. So welcome all of you. Look forward to hopefully gaining some wisdom today with and from each other. Welcome, Zaid, as well. So Anton, welcome aboard. Anton is doing us a favor today because he's 2 hours earlier, so he had to really wake up and get an early start today. So welcome aboard, Anton.
What's going on, everybody? I'm so happy to be here.
And so a couple of things that I want to start with, and part of the reason I value Anton being here is Anton is one of the most knowledgeable people of our bodies and our systems and health, and he can help explain some of the chemistry that goes on with in us related to fear. And so I appreciate him bringing his expertise. But a couple of things that I want to really point out up front is that I do not promote being fearless, because I think being fearless is not wise. because fear is made part of our design for a reason. And that is that in certain situations, it causes us to be able to react and protect ourselves from harm and so on. And there is nothing wrong with that kind of fear. It is, again, part of our design. But what we're talking about and what I am observing all over is the just a pervasive fear and anxiety that's going on with us and around us, and just really taking over our lives. Anton, are you seeing this kind of fear going on?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've been seeing it for a long time, and a lot of people think that COVID is really the thing that brought it on, but it's not. It's been happening for a long time. You know, I'll say it because I think you've warned people this is going to be an open conversation. I think that fear is used to control population. Fear is designed to get people to be blind in a way because it takes over our logic and it really makes our primitive brain act out. It makes our primitive brain become the dominant thinking pattern versus our powerful human brain. And I've been seeing it in this country for a long time. I see it from the media, I see it from government, and now that COVID's come around, I see it, even in healthcare now. And the question that I always go to, why? Why is this happening? What is going on that this is such a big thing? And it keeps being used over and over and over to get us to not pay attention. That's to me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's not what I'm saying, but there's a lot of stuff that can be done to people when we're in fear, and that's what I'm seeing.
Well, Anton, I want to come back to it because a specific question, just a moment. Welcome, Moses. Glad to have you from India, and Sharon from New Jersey, and Ann, welcome from Texas. Glad to have all of you. So, your comment that it's been going on a while, we have seen fear like this used throughout history in different ways and times. And I know you, having originally grown up in Russia, you saw this firsthand there. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, it's we're going back to the Cold War and those times, and it's interesting because both countries used fear of the other country to do things that maybe people didn't necessarily approve of, right? Like, for example, if you go back to Russia, and even back then, even during communism, and you ask how majority of people felt about Americans, we didn't hate Americans. Like we had really liked the culture, we liked all these things. And even coming back here now, I talk to people. I'm like, look, we didn't hate Russians. We hated the government, right? We hated what the government did and what it stood for, but the people we never hated. But both of our governments set the people against each other to be able to do certain actions that otherwise would not have been okay.
Yeah, and so we've just got to look at some ways to overcome this pervasive fear, and just really need to work through and gain some wisdom so that we're not living in a state of fear. And Anton, share a little bit about the body chemistry that while we're living in a state of fear. Again, not the times when we need to do the fight or flight consideration, but this just constant living in fear. Share a little bit about that, please.
Well, you said this already. We can't be fearless. Fear is there for a reason. Fear is a physiological response that our body gets in order to avoid danger that could harm us, or cause us, some sort of detriment. And oftentimes we think that the same physiological thing happens or it doesn't happen if it's only a little bit, right? We think that it's a massive event, and I relate this a lot to stress because fear creates stress. Fear creates the same kind of chemical response that your boss yelling in your ear does. It creates the
Mm.
same kind of situations. And there is a theory, it's called polyvagal nerve theory. And it's pretty prevalent since like mid 90s about understanding human behavior and how stress connects to it. And really there is three types of, three levels. You have your recovery level, you have your kind of go level, and you have your shutdown level. And
Hmm.
fear lives in that shutdown level. That's where either something massive happened and we went straight there and it's the freeze aspect, or it's just a slow drip, just slow drip of little low level fear over time without the recovery being able to come back down where we can relax and let go and enjoy life again. That pushes people to that level. But when we're there, we lose our logical ability. We lose our ability to look at things as I call it a powerful human. That's what a prefrontal cortex is. And we become ingrained in this lizard brain, right? You talk a lot about lizards and dragons and how things are not accurately perceived when we're in that point. Yes, 100%, because at that point it becomes all about survival. It becomes all about you know um, like silly things happen, like comparison starts to happen all the time, a
Hmm.
lot worse, and all of these negative things that we as powerful humans look at and we go, that emotion doesn't serve me. But when we are in that state and we're there for chronic periods of time, those emotions start to dominate us.
Mm. Very, very much so. Let's see. Sharon shares a comment that I appreciate. And by the way, Sharon, I'm not sure why, but today you're showing up as LinkedIn user, but this is our regular friend, Sharon Bingert. And she says, fear is instilled in people even before COVID. Fear makes people do things they ordinarily wouldn't do what they're doing. And we're seeing this all over. In fact, yesterday I was serving at church. I serve on parking duty, and we have a rather large church, and we have police that direct traffic, so we keep people safe getting in and out of church. And uh, I've been doing this for a while, and yesterday the police actually that were standing out directing traffic, had to get two cars over to the side because of road rage. I thought at first it might be they were speeding, but the officer said no, they got into it and road raging at each other. And, again, just more evidence of this state of uncontrolled emotion and so on. Welcome, Omoteo, to our group. And also, Trisha, glad to have you. I'm glad that you were able to find us by clicking on my profile. And Trisha's joining from Chicago. Great. Glad to have you as well. And be sure to put uh, in the comments any questions, thoughts you have, because this is not supposed to be a monologue. We want this to be a dialogue. And here is a comment from Pearl. Stress triggers a physical reaction in our body. And it does. And chemically, it creates challenges for us that, am I correct, Anton? If this is constant, it not only happens, but to reverse or go back to normal, the longer we stay in it, the longer it takes to recover. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. So, we're talking about the connection. This is where a lot of times people separate mental and physical health. And I say we can't do that. It's just health, right? They're
Mm.
very interconnected. And the reason for it is because thoughts create chemicals, right? Because that's just, if you stay in that fear all the time, you're constantly thinking you're equivalent, like from a physiological standpoint, you're always running away from a lion. So your body's kicking these chemicals in order to enhance performance. That's what it's designed to do, right? Fear comes in, we create these chemicals, they make us respond, they get us away from this negative stimulus in front of us. But when it's chronic, it becomes really, really bad. But on the other hand, chemicals create thoughts. So this is to the other point, another person's point, that fear makes us do irrational things. And that's how those things connect. And the problem is it all ties into adrenal glands. Adrenal glands are, they're tiny little walnut-sized organs that sit on top of our kidneys. And they regulate so much by regulating cortisol, which is not just about stress. It regulates our blood sugar, it regulates inflammation in the body, it plays a role in immunity. Take perfect example. Somebody that's in fear all the time is going to get sick more often. It's just how it
Mm,
goes. That's a very easy sign to see that your immunity starts going down. And to your point, Kev, when those adrenal glands become, crashed out, that's what burnout is, right? The word burnout's become more common today. It can take up to a year and a half of medical recovery on medication to get them back to normal. And the
wow.
whole time, this person is not going to be themselves. Low energy, just very, different person because they're living in that limbic brain. They're living, in a very hopeless state. Um, and a perfect example, I had that happen to a client many years ago, and she wasn't even allowed to exercise, right? Exercise, something that we think is so positive and is going to be good for us. That would be too much of stress on her body to
Hmm.
be able to take on. So she had to do nothing. The only she could do, she could be in the pool, not even swim, just be in water.
Wow. The effects are remarkable. And again, I know people struggle with this, and I know that mental health has become a big concern. And I think the key in your comment is it cannot just be mental health; it has to be whole health. And part of what I've observed since I've been around longer than seems like most people still around, with a few exceptions, is that be we are more subject to fear today than ever before, and I have uh, a hypothesis, and it's not a fact; it's just a hypothesis, an opinion, and that is that I think part of the reason that we are not as ready to overcome this fear, to get back to a state of balance, I guess would be a good term, is that the area of faith and spiritual. More now than ever, we as a culture deny spiritual, and we reject faith. And in fact, it is more and more a taboo topic to even get into faith, but it's a factor. It's a part of that holistic approach to health that is ignored. So let's see here. Want to share some thoughts from our participants. Oh, welcome to Genesis. Glad to have you. Appreciate you being with us. Let's see here. And Pearl is just echoing that stress triggers a physical reaction in our body. And Genesis, indeed, thoughts create chemicals. So we're getting agreement. And let's see what Rosemary has to say. What we're seeing here in Australia is an overload of information that, although factual, just serves to frighten people. I have a neighbor who is so fearful of COVID that she wears a face mask in her own home, even though she lives on her own. I'm more concerned about her mental and emotional well-being than I am of her catching COVID. Rosemary, you're spot on. I can grow more concerned daily that the effects of this fear is going to do more to cause us physical health problems. And we're going to see those results go along. Plus, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we're in the fear mode, isn't our immune system compromised?
Well, 100%, and it's very compromised. And it becomes very chronic, and it becomes small illnesses first that become greater illnesses. But to Rosemary's comment, we just talked about this, right? Fear is illogical. We look at people and we don't understand how they can't see that what they're doing doesn't make any sense. But when that fear takes over, that logic dies. That logic is no longer present. The way that our
Mm,
brain, signals work is the responses from the body and have to pass the lizard brain first, limbic brain, before they can get to the front of our head to the prefrontal cortex. And when that lizard brain is so overactive, that never happens. That they stop there, body reacts versus responds, right? That's another, topic of conversation we could have. Before we can respond, we react. And that's what causes people to do very, very irrational things. But Kev, to your point of faith, you remind me of this all the time. And it helps so much to overcome so many things when we understand that we're not in control. We're just here to serve his will, right?
Mm,
And if we forget about faith and we walk away from faith, we can't have that reminder. We feel that we control everything. We feel that we can stop everything. Perfect example, I can battle COVID if I just stay at home, I don't go anywhere, wear my mask at home. But if, we surrender, we understand that Lord will protect me. I will take the precautions that are necessary or whatever. But in the long run, if it's my time, it's gonna be my time. But without faith, we can't say that. People have lost that ability.
yeah, it is. Again, I think it's a key. It's not the only key, but in fact, Trisha, I apologize, Trisha, you're also showing up on the stream as LinkedIn user, but this is Trisha that she appreciates the value of faith over fear. And I know sometimes people look at faith, and part of the reason we have culturally um, rejected faith is because we think that faith is blind and illogical. And the faith I walk in isn't blind at all. It is not illogical. And in many cases, it is more logical and more eye open than walking the way we do a lot of times. And I've got to share a quote that I have been sharing for a while, but Anton and I've talked about this, and when he talks about the lizard brain and how fear is driven, the dragons we create in our minds that cause us fear are generally actually lizards over exaggerated. So it's living in that lizard brain state for so long that this lizard, this little fear, becomes this great dragon, this monster, and it becomes so difficult to overcome it just because of our mind and where our mind is gone with it. And it really is sad. Let's see. Let's see what Pearl shares. Says fear doesn't actually exist. Generally speaking, especially this kind of fear, I agree. The challenge exists. The good thing is that we can control fear since it comes from our own thoughts, but in reality, it's not easy to do. That is so true, Pearl. And because of that, that's part of the reason that I really felt very moved in my heart that we need to talk about it. We talked about it a number of weeks ago, but it's just becoming such a powerful force in our culture, in our lives, that I felt like we needed to go after this again because we need to help each other in growing in wisdom to be able to not live in this state of fear. We aren't designed to do it. And those of you that participate in this podcast know that I look to the Bible as a place of wisdom. And it's very interesting that at least 365 times the Bible says, don't be anxious or don't be fearful, and goes on to offer ways to keep from being fearful. So again, it goes against our very design to live in this state. So let's see. Anne's got a comment here. It says it's easy to say faith over fear, but we have to ask God for help, especially when it gets to this level. Do you have a few tips we can use every day to stay out of fear? Yeah, we will offer some up. Anne, you're right. It's easier said than done. And I hope I don't come across as flippant or whatever in regard to it. It is a very big challenge. And then Sharon shares, faith has so much to do with it. I believe faith in God helps me through many situations as it is helping me now. And then Anne shares, fear paralyzes. That's what we are seeing so much of right now. We're watching people just stuck. And like Rosemary shared of the neighbor, walking around protecting herself from this virus, which, by the way, get on my soapbox. Okay, this virus, for my opinion, and I can show you the research to support this. It's not just a pull out of the air opinion, but the way this is being presented is driven to instill fear, and there is not a clear consensus on much about this virus. So I encourage you, if you're dealing with it with fear, to please take some time and research. And this is another thing that I want to share is this, because this goes back to the challenge that I offered up to wisdom seekers when we first started this back in January. And this is more needed today than ever before. And that is to disconnect from the noise around you. Okay. And much of the noise that is driving this fear right now is much of our news media and even social media. Once we disconnect from that, we then need to start observing and looking not just outwardly at what we see right around us, but what's going on inside of us. Recognize the lizard brain, recognize that it's a lizard and that it's not designed to be driving us, and then to seek and gain wisdom about what we observe. Ann was asking, what do we do? What's a tip? Well, if you do this, I don't offer guarantees very often because I've been around long enough to know better. But if you do this on a regular basis, this will help. And I will tell you part of the basis for this. I go back to the Bible, and the Bible tells us in Romans not to be conformed to this world. Okay, don't let the world and what's going on around us drive us, but be transformed, changed, which is part of how you overcome is transformation by renewing our mind. And I think that's where, by the way, this challenge comes from, is the concept of renewing our minds on a regular basis, because what we're dealing with right now is a battleground in our mind and the information and inputs we put into it. And just like a computer, if you put wrong data in and ask it to calculate an outcome, it will come out with bad results because it's got bad information. And we've got to be so careful of those inputs right now, because there is, first of all, just sheer volume. It's just too much. Second of all, the inputs we're getting, if it's not kept balanced and it's not kept in context of wisdom, the bigger picture. See, part of the problem is, and Anton, again, correct me if I'm wrong, when we get into that lizard brain and we're living there, we have about this much scope. And we are so focused on the situation that we're fearful of that we lose sight of everything around us. Is that fair?
Well, of course, you can't think outside the box at all. You only see the information that's being fed to you, and you start to accept it as truth because you don't have the time to process. The brain reacts before it processes, and that's the problem. But to Ann's point, she was asking some tips, and I see fear overcome through thought often, and thought alone. And I say, don't forget that we said that thoughts create chemicals and chemicals create thoughts. So if a person is not in a good physiological state, and I don't mean just exercise and things like that, I mean, nutrition is terrible. You know, they don't get enough sleep, for example. They're much more susceptible to their thoughts dominating and putting them into that fear state. So me and Kev will talk about this a lot. Control what you can control. Not everything you can control in life, but there's certain choices, especially when it comes down to our health and our physiology, that we can control. But when we can't do it all, there's also supplements. You know,
Mm,
we have to remember that fear is a chemical reaction that then gets interpreted into a thought we can understand. So if our dopamine, our serotonin, and most importantly, there's a neurotransmitter called GABA, if that's not in balance, we are going to have more predisposition to let those thoughts overrun our brain and
mm,
dominate it. So, you know, it's hard to explain. You know, this would be many hours long conversation if we really dove into it. But research brain support, you know, and see how you can
mm,
supplement both, you know, from a chemical standpoint, but also mindfulness, right? It's a concept that I like to talk about, but I like to expand mindfulness beyond like Eastern medicine practice. It's not just about yoga and meditation. It's about disconnecting from everything and bringing yourself to a current moment. And since we've talked about faith, we talked about God, that's what you're supposed to do when you pray, a direct channel of
mm,
communication between you and your creator. Well, guess what? If your mind is all over the place and you're not really focused on that moment, you're not, I'm sorry to say, you're not doing it right. Like, and that's, you're not doing it the way that it was, the way it was designed. I'm laughing because it's kind of silly to say that. And it's not always going to be like that. But just to slow down enough and really try to connect to that present moment helps us
mm,
to come back and hit the reset button, even if momentarily. And the more often we can do that, the more often we can pray. And if you're not Christian necessarily, meditate, you know,
mhm,
do movement that brings you going for a walk, that brings you into a really present moment. The more of you are allowing your body to come out of that lizard brain state and allow
mm.
to recover, allow to recharge. So those are some things that we can be doing.
Yeah, and uh, Wagi shares, I think he means fear is one of the senses. It is important to filter the information we receive. So add, uh, if to eat fear created and go to our subconscious. In other words, I believe, if I understand correctly, yeah, if we aren't careful filtering what we put in, you know, that, and we start living in that, that it gets deeper into who we are to a point that it takes longer to overcome, as we were talking about earlier. Um, and Lee shares about public speaking is the most common fear. Yeah, we're told that it is a very common fear. The good news, though, is that we don't have to choose to be out in public speaking. We can make alternate choices that keep us from living in that fear. And welcome Richard from Richard has been on before, and he makes comments. Given the climate is difficult to find objective research. You are so correct, Richard. Because of what's going on, one of the things I've been doing is just going, first of all, if somebody says that this organization or that organization says something, don't accept someone's view of that. Go uh, to that source, original source, and find out for yourself. Because, for example, the CDC is cited for so many things, but yet if you go to the CDC site and read what's there, it gives a different picture than um, the picture painted by using information from that site. And so one of the ways to do things is challenge the source. Anymore, there are very few sources that I will take at face value. One of them's the Bible, and because I've come to trust it, and also, but just really, really take the time, because the alternative, as you mentioned, in our current climate, Richard, is that we are pushed into fear. And anymore, if we don't take that time, we're going to be overcome. And that's why it's so critical. Welcome, Dr. Jesman from Japan. So glad to have you. Dr. Jesmond's been with us before. Welcome. And Ann makes a comment. Yeah, our battlefield is in the mind. It is where we're going to win or lose this battle of fear. And there, I'll share another comment here shortly, but just mention that what we put into our minds is going to be so key, because even if we do the physical health components and do all of that, if we are allowing constant bad information to come in, even the healthiest person's going to succumb. And it factors in stress, it factors that, but we have got to be very intentional as we approach life, especially right now, to guard what we're letting come in. It's a principle that's been around for a long time, and people talk about being open-minded. Yeah, that I understand to a degree, but there's also a point we should shut down our mind and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow that in. And that includes with our eyes, our ears, and even what we say to ourselves. Something that we just have to be careful of, that we don't reinforce this bad information by our own narrative. Something that Anton and I talk about in dealing with stress is our narratives, and be careful of that. Let's see, Rosemary is sharing an experience. Last week I arrived at a crossroad in my work where I was faced with two separate choices. Choice one was to accept that what was happening was wrong, but nothing that I could do anything about. It felt uncomfortable, but safe choice. Two was to put the information together and place my trust into the hands of the Lord. And even though it was terrifying for me, I sat with the two options and heard the voices of all those I came to serve, asking me to be strong for them. Yes. And one of the challenges that I feel right now is having, God's put me in a place to be in front of people, and that's fine. But I feel extra pressure right now that if I am a true leader, that I've got to be willing to face the fears that we are collectively facing, and to speak in terms of courage and help to set the example. Because if you're in a position, formal or informal, to be in leadership, it is incumbent upon you to be able to stand up and speak the logic, the truth, whatever you want to use to help overcome these fears, to help bring that lizard brain back into perspective. And we're not seeing that on a large scale from the official leadership around us. And so, Rosemary, I appreciate that you faced it, made choices, and chose to model courage in this case. And that's what we have. If we're in a leadership role in any form or fashion, whether it's formal or informal, we got to do more of it. Let's see. Zaid, fears are part of our basic functions as human. That works in our reptilian brain, which is the center of fight or flight. That's far away from our analysis system in the front part of the brain. Yeah, Zaid, that's something that we have talked about, and Anton's laid it out, and we've got being aware of that alone. To me, when I start identifying the dragons, they take on a different perspective. In fact, Ann was asking about a tip. One of the things that I find, and sounds almost silly, so simple, but I find it effective. These fears that we are living with, we need to get them out of our head. And one of the easiest things is just to state, boy, I'm afraid of this, whatever this is, and hear ourselves talk about it. And when even that alone will help us, because sometimes when you do say that, you kind of go, wow, that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't fit what's going on. So just hearing it. And then another step is to go to a trusted friend, a mentor, and speak out about it. Tell what your thoughts are. Anton, thoughts on getting this fear? Oh, welcome, Supam from India, by the way. So,
Yeah,
and your thoughts.
rationalize the fear. I mean, there's been numerous comments that are talking about the battles in the mind, and all these different statements you've all made. Our body's response is about have to do with just how we interpret it. Just however we interpret the thing that we're seeing, the thing that we're talking about, the thing that we're afraid of, the half of the physiological and mental response is just how we name it. If you rationalize it and you work through it and you go, this is something temporary, it'll pass. This is something that is exaggerated, it really is not that big of a deal. By talking yourself through it, as Kevin just said, you're actually changing how your mind and your body are going to respond to it. It's not just the fear itself, it's not the situation itself, it's the internal story we tell ourselves about it. And if that story is irrational, and that story is, like somebody said, limbically driven, that primitive brain driven, then it's going to hurt us worse in every aspect from the mind, body, and the spirit. But if we rationalize it, that changes our response.
Mm, very, very much so. Let's see. And so I want to share another quote. Again, this is primarily to help us with tools and to be able to begin to overcome. And courage is part of our solution. And it isn't the absence of fear, it is the presence of deep character. So, one of the things that we can do to combat fear is to allow and even embrace and encourage continued growth of character and developing trust and faith and honesty and integrity. The more we have a depth of character, the greater likelihood that we can have courage. And courage doesn't eliminate fear, it overcomes fear. And especially in this pervasive fear, not again the fight or flight, that's got to be there, that's good, but this constant state of fear and anxiety, that is such a key thing, is to continue to allow character to be built into our life. And by the way, character comes through adversity, and I know that a lot of people want to avoid adversity, but we don't need to do that. So let's see what Ann says I have found that surrounding myself with the right people has been super helpful. Now's the time to check your circle. How much do you think we're affected by people we surround ourselves with? Anton, I'll let you jump on that.
I mean, Bernie log principle, right? I mean, we've all probably heard that concept. And you take a dry log, you put it in a fire, it's going to start burning. You take a burning log, you put it in the middle of ash, it's going to stop burning. And we are the average of five people that we surround ourselves with, right? And if they're
Mhm.
living in a constant state of fear, that's going to add to your state of fear. If you're living with courageous people who are rational, who understand that, you know, fear is very much real sometimes, but we also exaggerate it, and then they come together. That's the thing too. Sometimes people turn on each other when they're in fear. And
Mm,
if you have a good
yeah.
circle and they're supportive and they come together, that's what you should be looking at, right? When coronavirus is a really great example of this, right? When people start discussing coronavirus and their views happen to be different, does your group
Wow.
turn into an argument? Or does your group turn into a discussion that works through it together logically in a friendly manner, understanding that all opinions are valid and all opinions need to be, heard? Or does somebody start, to dominate the situation and really try to change everybody's opinion based on what their opinion is?
Well, and I have to say, in my own family, uh, this whole situation has created strife for us over this very topic. And the having an opinion as that is not in agreement with others has created challenges. And I think that, uh, unfortunately, I think that's part of some people. I don't know. I can't judge people's hearts, but by appearances, some people are trying to drive us apart. And fear, by the way, one of the best ways to divide people is get them fearful. And it's happening, whether, one can argue whether it's intentional or coincidental. I'm not going to get into that, but the fact is it's going on. And it's a bad place for us to be culturally, personally, for our families and our work. I mean, it's everywhere. Let's see. Richard shares a comment. Says, I know that we're all busy and time's a commodity, but it's very important to take it to decrease the disparity of information out. Thank you for being here today. Yes, I got to go back to this practice. And I really believe that this is something that we all do well to commit to. And there was a time where you could do this occasionally. I think current environment, this should become a daily practice, disconnecting, observing, and trying to find the wisdom in what you see. And that's, again, mind renewal process, very critical. And let's see here. This is a great comment from, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes the screen is scrolling. I clicked on the wrong comment. But I know that the Lord will never ask me to carry more than I'm capable of carrying. See, back to the faith concept, being able to really tap into that and understand that a factor in what's going on around us is an involved creator, God that is not just some surreal concept out in Never Land or whatever, that God is there, and understanding that character is that God loves us. And as a result of, like what Rosemary mentions, he's not going to allow us to have something put on us that we cannot carry. And if it seems difficult, having that faith connection is where we get the help, because we can get that encouragement. And one of the ways that, by the way, and wow, if we had more time, if we have some time, I'll dive into this a little bit. But one of the keys is God brings people into our lives for the purpose of encouragement and perspective. And that is a way to help us not live in this fear. When we're around people that help us to get that perspective. Remember, wisdom, the difference in wisdom is perspective. It is seeing things outside of ourselves. It's driven beyond our own personal needs and motivations. And so the more we do that, the more we get people around us, or allow God to bring into our lives and pay attention to them to help us get those perspectives, the wiser we're going to approach any topic, but especially this one about fear. And it has never been any more necessary than it is today for us to remain healthy and to continue moving forward in courage. Let's see here. Zaid shares, because fear centers in the brain is far from the analysis center, fear tends to dominate. Yes, you're right, Zaid. That's why being very intentional becomes necessary, because if we don't be intentional in our approach, we will live in lizard brain, right, Anton? Is that correct?
Absolutely. Intentionality requires logic. Intentionality requires, proactive thinking, not reactive thinking. And when we're able to do that, we subdue this lizard brain, we subdue that reactive thinking, we allow the signal to travel all the way to the front of our brain, as the gentleman's saying, before making a decision, before making a choice. And as I opened up, earlier today, if we are constantly living in that primitive side of our brain, we're no better than an animal. We really are
Ooh,
not.
yeah.
We are living in survival. We are not trying to thrive. We're just trying to get from point A to point B, survive the day, go to sleep, do it all over again. And I don't know about you guys, but that's not living. That's not
Mm-mm.
what we're designed to be.
That's miserable. I'll call it what it is. But unfortunately, that's where we're at. And even what's interesting, okay, I know for a fact that people want to say, well, if we're successful, quote unquote, and have money and all of this stuff, this is not an issue. That is so far from true. I've been fortunate to or be aware that there are people that watch this podcast and they are the archetypal successful people, and yet they are going, isn't there more? Because this is not the answer that we're looking for. And that's what we're talking about, is getting to that place where it's not about the outward and the trappings. Again, Anne makes a good comment, says surround yourself with people that have courage and people that we can trust. And such an important point, and discernment. Discernment, it becomes critical, especially right now, and it's part of how we deal with this confusion of information. There are times that when I hear something, I know immediately within my mind, my spirit, everything about me, I go, that is wrong. Now, at that point, I can't always explain why it's wrong. I usually have to do research because anymore people don't trust our discernment and all. So we have to support it with research. But I go on to research it and I come back and go, yeah, and this is why. And you look and you see, and that's the key part of discernment. And my opinion is that part of the value of gaining wisdom is, along with wisdom becomes a more capable level of discernment, and something that helps us avoid getting into the fear trap, because we can see it for what it is before it takes us over. Being able to discern untruth, incorrect information goes a long way towards helping us be able to avoid getting trapped into situations, especially when people around us are buying into that wrong information and saying it again. And at a minimum, whether we voice this with others or not, at that point, we know, at least for ourselves, that our radar is up and we're going, wait a minute, this is, something's not right here, and I need to be intentional to figure out what's going on with it. Sharon goes on to share that my husband was operated on last Wednesday and fear set in because he's not doing well. I prayed to God and asked him to help me overcome the fear and do what needs to be done in order to help him as best I can. And I happen to know Sharon shared that that made a difference, and it does. That's prayer. God, I can't handle this, help me. And it really has a positive effect when we do that. It's not just an activity. In fact, I've gotten to a point when people tell me about challenges, rather than saying, okay, well, all I can do is pray, I say, no, the best thing I can do is pray. That is the most powerful thing I can do before any other action or activity. And the more we can grow in that concept, the better off that we will be in our walk and in our influence and affecting our own lives. And so I want to share a graphic, and this is something that I kind of put it down on paper, but this is a thought process that came out of our Perspective Force team. And I hope that you all will take this to heart and use it. But an exercise that we can use with this is also related to stress, but we just ask ourselves a few simple questions. Can I control it? If I can control it, I put it in that first bucket. And the answer is yes, then I make a plan accordingly and make it a priority and act. Okay, if I can't control it, then I go to this next bucket and say, well, can I influence it? Does it fit in this bucket? And if it does, same answer. Make a plan, prioritize, and act. But if it doesn't fit in either bucket, then and I'd forgotten about the name of this bucket, Anton, that we had come up with, but we put it in the bucket of acceptance and say it is what it is. I can't control it. I can't influence it. And that's when we, as the picture suggests, let go and let God. That's where our faith comes in. God, I can't handle this. I got to let go of it, but you can handle it. And that is a key part of overcoming fear. Anton, comments on this, since you were a key in helping come up with this concept and express it?
Well, first of all, fear is a form of stress, and that's why it's so relevant that you brought this up. There's so much stuff that we can't control, that at least the things that we can control and the things that we can't influence, we should do what we can. It's a little bit different way of looking at this graphic than we talked about in the past, and I'm going to tie this into our health. Health choices is something that we can control, and it supports us. The people we surround ourselves with is something we can control. And those are the things that I tell people to focus on when the world is going crazy. Make sure you're surrounded by love. Make sure you're surrounded by God. Make sure that your body is healthy, because that supports your mind being healthy. And everything else, sometimes we just have to let it go and let it be.
Yeah, I know that even, I have to practice what I preach. And I know some recent situations in my work environment, I've had to go back to this and say, can I control it? No. Can I influence it? No. And so I've had to let go of it. And in fact, I am in the process of putting together an evaluation matrix for one of my clients. And I told him, I says, well, when I approach this, I'm going to ask 3 questions. Can I control it? If so, then I need to be held accountable. If I can influence it, I need to be held accountable, but I can't guarantee it. If not, I can't hold on to it, and I don't need to be held accountable for it by the people that I'm contracting with. So this is a practical function of what we can do to help with fear, which is part of stress. I will put in a shameless plug for an assessment. Anton and I are part of Perspective Force, and as a team, we put together an assessment. And if you'll want to go take it free, please do go to our website, perspectiveforce.com, and take it. This might help you with some of the perspective you need to overcome some of the fear and stress out there, just as a thought. Good evening, Rosemary. I understand it's late. Thanks for being a regular in spite of the challenges. I hope you have a great week as well. And let's see. Want to make sure. Okay. And I want to let Sharon, I shared perspective, but let her share perspective. She said, that's exactly what I did. I left it up to God, and it's helped. Thank you. Yes, it is real. Faith is such a key here. One other suggestion, we're almost out of time, But I encourage you to do a simple thing. This is for not only for you, but for others. And that is in fact, Ann kind of hits on it. Let's all stay in touch and see how we can support each other. Okay. By the way, I have started a group, Wisdom Seeker group. And if you want to be in that group to help stay in touch and to help support each other, let me know. It's an unlisted group, so you're not going to find it. It's by invitation only for a reason. But if you want to be a part and be a part of helping encourage each other, let me know. In fact, type in the comments, Wisdom Seeker group, and I'll send an invite to you to join. But the other thing that I find, and I really, God used it to benefit me, bless me, but also others. If someone comes to your heart and your mind, and you know when this happens, if you're at all in tune, is that if that happens, reach out to the person. You may not have a specific reason that you want to reach out to them other than to say, hey, thought about you. You were on my mind. You were on my heart. And I prayed for you and just let you know that a friend thought about you. And I have been so blessed by that so many times, not just blessed by responding, but I've had so many people come back and say, wow, that came at such a critical time for me because I needed that. And the more we do that for each other, the better we are. And LinkedIn is a good vehicle for that because we see people on LinkedIn. And number of times, I felt laid on my heart, reach out. So please do that. Anton, closing remarks?
Honestly, it's what we said. I've already repeated, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's so close to my heart. Know that the mind, the body, the spirit are all connected. Chemicals create thoughts, and thoughts create chemicals. Don't try to approach things from one side or the other. Find balance within all of them, and that's how we can overcome fear.
And so with that, we'll sign off. Thank you. I appreciate the great engagement, folks. This makes this podcast so much better to have the engagement. Encourage you to, if you can, be a regular. Love to have you as a regular, and encourage you to invite others, because this is all about finding wisdom in life and ways to use that and apply that wisdom to our lives so that we can walk wisely. And in the end, by the way, that's where we'll find our success, is walking wisely, whatever that looks like for each of us. Thanks, everybody. So grateful for you being here. Anton, appreciate you getting up early and joining us. And see you guys next week. May have a special guest next week, still firming it up. But whatever we do each week, Monday mornings, 8 o'clock, we get together and try to find some wisdom in what life throws at us, and hopefully grow to walk in that wisdom. So thanks, everyone. See you next week. Invite others, please. Check out Perspective Force for that assessment too. Take care. Have an amazing week.